Perfect.
Ripe Fruit is a nonprofit education initiative dedicated to identifying and strengthening innate skills as they appear along the spectrum of ways we think and learn. Our mission is to infuse mainstream learning with enhanced curriculum, customized lesson plans, and demonstrated creative systems. We aim to foster comprehensive learning, enthusiasm, and confidence for all students. The Dean Talks serves as a conduit, think tank, and intensive to discuss how to identify and support unique learning styles. All systems are go. The Dean Talks starts now.
What a wonderful intro. I love that. So lively. Great job.
Are we cueing the intro YouTube video?
My son's team, they were on a 42-game win streak. At the end of the game, one of the players, he stood up and he said, "This loss will not define us as a team." It's not what we go through. It's how we go through it. The reality of this life is that we are going to face some adversity. We must examine who we are. No matter how tough it gets, we gotta go hard and continue to fight.
Okay, welcome to the Dean Talks. My name is Stephen King, and I am your host with the most. For those of you that have been following our Dean Talks, this is actually our third session, and this is our sensory edition of the Dean Talks, where we exist to position neurodiversity in the diversity equity, and inclusion conversation. This is done for research, and we want a range of options and perspectives. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of hosts or sponsors of Ripe Fruit Foundation. This information is not intended to replace therapeutic or medical advice. This session is being recorded. So what we just experienced was what it was like to live without one of the senses that we might take for granted. And that's just to kind of help frame this conversation. And we are going to immediately jump right into our panelists today. On with us, we have Nomita Advani, a licensed art therapist with 15 years of experience instructing students with learning disabilities, as well as 10 years of experience as a visual arts department chair heading a K-12 visual arts program. Ms. Advani employs talk therapy and that's Ms. Advani, employs talk therapy and art therapy with clients and holds courses, workshops, and presentations on art therapy. We also have Tanasia Hazelton, a DEI specialist and master social worker who has helped direct a program for English learners, DEI training, and program infrastructure in partnership with the University of Maryland, and founded Infinitely Impactful Solutions in her continuing work to authentically and sustainably advance equity. Her philosophy is equity is a value that's inscribed in her DNA and our DNA. And my name, of course, is Stephen King, and I will be your host. We're entering the panel discussion, and we'll discuss our big hits and takeaways at the end. So please take notes and feel free to engage with us during the session. And what that means is you can place questions in our chat. We will be monitoring the chat throughout this session and turning to questions as they surface. So let's get started with our first question. And once again, I want to welcome you all to the Dean Talks. For some, the world seems louder and patience is thinner. We're seeing high sensitive persons, neurotypicals.
Ash, I'm listening to a talk on
autism,
neurodiversity.
For example, purposefully minimizing sensory. For example, what we just heard was someone who was not on mute. So I just heard them say they're listening to a talk on neurodiversity. So this is a great example of how the world works, folks, which is sensations can come in and they can go, and how people process those sensations as they come and go can be different for each one of us. So once again, high sensitive persons, neurotypicals, and people with autism, for example, purposefully minimize sensory experiences through sensory deprivation tanks, sound healing, and sensory friendly events. What is the impact of too much external stimulation? And does minimizing sensory help or lower our tolerance for external stimulation? We're going to turn to Tanasia for that answer. Tanasia, welcome to the Dean Talks. And what is your feedback about sensory deprivation?
Hello, thank you, Stephen. So I'll first address some of the impacts of having too much external stimulation, which can be, and this can happen for anyone, but the effects are heightened for people, for neurodivergent people and people with different learning styles, etc. And some of the effects of having too much stimuli can be that it's disorienting. It can be confusing for different people. It can also completely displace someone. So their attention was originally on maybe a talk that they were listening to or watching, etc. Their attention can be completely displaced if the stimuli is too overwhelming. It can also cause different emotional reactions that can make it challenging for someone to get through an event that they're at, whether it's virtual or in person. There are a lot of different stimuli, a lot of different impacts. Even someone can start having different physical sensations as a result to too much external stimuli that overwhelms any of their five senses. That can make it hard for them to get through the event.
Okay. I wanted to circle back a little bit to some of these examples that we talked about. Just to be clear, there is an entire kind of culture that is building around this awareness that people process stimulation differently, and that certainly moves into how do people learn differently. So we certainly can't unpack all of that at one time. We're kind of centering around the sensory deprivation portion, and we will go ahead and let our second panelist, which is Naomi, chime in on that first question. Naomi, welcome to the Dean Talks.
Thank you. It's Nomita. Thanks.
Oh, Nomita.
Yeah. Yeah, in my work with clients and students, I really try to have them sort of become aware of how it is that they learn best, what it is that triggers them, what is it in the external stimuli that is causing them to lose focus or causing them to increase anxiety or whatever comes up for them. Because with that awareness and helping them to understand, are you learning best by looking, what stimuli is most sort of challenging for you to have around? And once you become aware of that, then you can start to advocate for that, or have other people help you advocate for that for you. So you can create, the optimum environment that you need to be able to learn, to be able to work, to be able to produce or communicate or do whatever it is that you need to do. So I think, it starts with really helping right from childhood a person understand what exactly, creating that self-awareness, sensory self-awareness, right? What is it that is triggering for you? What is it that is challenging? What stops you from focusing? And then once they start to understand that, then the next step is to be able to communicate that to others and advocate for that with just self-advocate or get someone to help them to advocate for that. And then also figuring out, so, okay, now that I know this is what triggers me and this is what is my optimum environment? What do I need? So first is the awareness, and then it goes into, okay, what do I need therefore? What is my optimum environment that would help me to be able to do my best work, to be able to reach my best potential and contribute, whatever it is that I've come here to contribute. So in a work environment or in schools, you do see, we have so much more set up in schools than we do in the work environment, and the work environment needs to kind of catch up to that. And we can take some of, we kind of assume that just because you became an adult, you're done and you outgrew, or somehow it went away. But it's who you are. Whatever it is and how you process is who you are, and you take that throughout your life. So it doesn't just magically go away. So our work environments haven't caught up to that. And we need to create that best setting. And that is done by the person advocating for what they need, and then work environments catching up to that and creating that setting for what each person needs based on their neurodiversity.
Okay. And we're this.
Stephen, can I add a little bit to that really quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I love that phrase that Nomita used of sensory self-awareness and understanding your sensory needs. And when we talk about a workplace, organization, or schools having more awareness around sensory issues and how the environment can be flexed to create more belonging for different people with different sensory challenges and issues. We call it making the environment more sensory friendly. And I'll put some information in the chat about that, but it's being aware of how different people are affected in all five of their senses, how the lighting might affect people, how the different processes throughout an event or a work day might affect different people, making sure that people are aware of different ingredients and foods if there's an event with food there, so people can know whether there are different ingredients that they might stay away from or that might stimulate them in ways that it might be disorienting. So I'll put a little bit more information about that in the chat, being sensory friendly as an environment and organization.
Okay. I really wanted to stay here for just a moment, because we have now opened up this new awareness, and the panelists have both kind of doubled down that the environment for and in this case, it's kind of a learning environment, has changed. We are now aware that different environments can produce different results. So I certainly think now where we are is, can either one of you give us some examples of what this new environment either does look like or could look like? And let's go ahead with you, Tanasia, and just kind of give us some examples of either what you see or what you would like to see specifically in for example, let's just paint a picture of a classroom environment. Do we want a classroom environment that maybe is tailored specifically to sound reduction, which would allow a better learning environment? So go ahead and let's talk about how we use technology and what these environments and these learning environments could look like. Tanasia?
Absolutely. The first step, as always, is to be aware of the sensory needs that are in your class, the sensory needs of children who are in your classroom, to the extent possible. And once you are aware of that, you can accommodate specifically for the people who are in your classroom. A big part of accessibility, especially in a setting like that, where you're going to usually have the same students for the entire year, or you have the same employees. If we're talking about the workplace, is remembering that a key part of accessibility is allowing for individualization when possible. And if you were talking about in a classroom setting, for example, having different options for adjusting the lighting is important. There's been a lot of research around different types of lighting, and especially fluorescent lighting, which can be really challenging and disorienting for kids with ADHD, kids with autism, and different challenges with sensory processing, and has been shown to have a direct impact on the way that students learn and their attention. If we're talking about in the classroom as well, having different options for sensory stimulation. So a person with different challenges with sensory processing and stimulation can be overstimulated, but they can be similarly understimulated. So for someone who is understimulated, having things like fidget spinners or different fidget toys so that they're able to help themselves stay stimulated and focus when they're in the classroom. And similarly, there are different teachers who may have different textures, safe textures or softer textures, et cetera, that can help when a student is overstimulated. They can sort of use different tools like that to help themselves calm down. I love how you said noise reduction, Stephen, of decreasing the amount of noise input that a child gets in the classroom is really important. So being aware of whether or not the windows are open or the classroom door, and keeping in mind that all of those little things that we can sometimes take for granted can be challenges for students who get overstimulated easily.
I can't stress enough that we just heard a siren and literally in the middle of what you were saying. And that is a direct example of how can we design our environments to be more learning friendly and less siren friendly. Although, that's certainly part of it. Ebony Kinney.
Well, I wanted to add in, Tanasia used the word accessibility, and I think we are changing. I'm in usability and software design. I think there's been a shift in what we think accessibility means. Accessibility used to be for people who are hearing impaired or sight impaired, and it was like this set list. And the way we're framing the conversation is now accessibility is someone is triggered by fluorescent lighting in place if there's an emergency that requires a flashing light in the middle of the room. And that's not accessible to that particular thing. So less focus on the diagnosis and more focus on all the different ways we can make life better for all of us.
Okay. Outstanding. Nomita, we're certainly waiting for you to weigh in. What does this environment look like? What do you see now, and what do you see, what would you like to see for this kind of education-friendly, sensory-aware environment?
So I think also in terms of auditory overstimulation, thinking of something like noise canceling headphones that, you know, a child can wear, because it's not always possible to adjust sound based on if you have multiple people in the room and everyone has a different need. Then, you know, really thinking about individually, what can that person bring or have available to them? So tools, what are the tools that even individually a person can have access to, so they can just create that environment, even if it means creating it just for themselves without having to adjust it for everyone, because, you know, we are trying to think of multiple people in one space. Also, you know, having opportunities for a quiet space. So movement break, someone who needs a lot of movement needs to have space to move, or be able to leave the room and take that movement break, or go to a you know, a quiet room for those who need, sort of when they're having that overstimulation and they know, okay, I'm reaching my threshold, I need to take a minute and just, you know, so having access to that, to a space like that would be really important.
Okay, and I'm going to jump into the chat right now. And Nicole has brought up that LED lighting is a problem for many. Both fluorescence and LED lighting have a degree of flicker that can overstimulate the brain and cause headaches. And one of the things that we're aware of is how certain flickering, you know, for example, like video games or certain flickering environments may actually trigger seizures in some people. So when we've been aware of that, what we're doing at this point is we are being even more sensitive about that. And I'm going to break that down just really quickly. A seizure or a convulsion may be something that you physically see. You may see someone that is having a grand mal seizure. You know, they may be on the ground convulsing, and you can, you know, physically see that. But imagine what may be going on inside the mind of someone who, even though you don't physically see the seizure, they may be having seizures or convulsions internally that are caused by their environment. So this is where this conversation really becomes super relevant. And my contribution to this portion of the conversation would be a classroom where you would have, you know, probably maybe some sections, so that one section would allow wider movement, for example. Another section may be super sound densing, to where it's making sounds so that, like, the ambulance sounds and police sounds and stuff don't come through, the environment sounds don't come through. So having a classroom environment that could flex, and then having the instructor that's aware of where particular students need to be placed within that flex classroom in order to learn the best. My name is Stephen King, and this is turning really super interesting as we are continuing our Dean Talk and exploring this topic. And we can't talk about sensory and not mention sensory development in children. For example, sensory seekers bump into things to feel the world around them. It seems when adults experience this, we call it sensory processing disorders. What is it? We know it's treated with occupational therapy. Can someone have it and not realize that they have it? We're going to toss this one over to Nomita.
Thank you. So yeah, we actually start out as sensory beings, as humans. You know, we first take in the world only on a sensory level. And there's actually about 8 senses. So we know the five senses, but there's also balance and vestibular and movement. That's part of our sensory development. There's proprioceptive development. That's really just how we can feel the energies in our environment. And we feel that through our muscles and, you know, our joints and our skin. We kind of just sense what's going on, if there's a change in temperature, if it's going from air conditioning to the air conditioning, the electricity goes off, we recognize that, oh, it's starting to get hot. So that's us sensing our environment. And then there's interoceptive development, also sensory development. That's the internal things inside us that we are aware of, like our thirst or our hunger, or when our heart rate is sort of increasing, which no one else may be aware of, but we feel it because it's internal. And all of this sensory development happens, within the first 12 to 18 months as humans. That's the fastest and the most that our sensory development is happening. And, there's different stages within those 12 to 18 months where different things are happening to those in those moments of sensory development. From 3 to 6 months, what's going on with it? From 6 to 12 months, what's going on with it? So those are good markers for us to notice if there is if there's neurodiversity, if someone is developing in a diverse way from what the expectation is within this framework or this time frame within that first year or 18 months when we are purely sensory beings. And that's when that part of us develops the most, and then the rest at any other time in our life. So that's when we can catch, things that are going on and offer an intervention if necessary, like, for example, occupational therapy. If a child is bumping into things and, maybe is having some trouble with their balance, then we can realize, oh, okay, there's some vestibular diversity here where they're not able to maybe sort of understand that their environment, or as to the distance between where they are and an object might be or a person might be. And so they might bump into things or stand a little too close to someone and not realize, because they're not sensing that there's sort of that sensation or that sensory development is not optimum. So it's kind of dulled down, so they're not feeling it. And so with occupational therapy, they do things like having a child sit in a little car and, give them sort of boundaries and help them understand how they can stay within those boundaries. And the boundaries, so the thing is, you're offering it also, the learning and the help is coming in a sensory way as well. So you're actually sitting, you have some kind of visual around you that helps you to see that, there's a line here and there's a line here, and that's what you're supposed to do. So those kinds of things with occupational therapy, which is also a sensory way of attending to things that need to be, the sensory development that needs to be helped. And, also recognizing that, when within the time frame of development, when you want to pay attention to what needs to be happening and what may or may not need an intervention.
Okay. Tanisha?
Thank you for that, Nomita. Very comprehensive. One thing that continually comes up for me as we talk about sensory processing disorders is how frustrating it can be for someone who experiences them, and also for someone who is not experiencing them themselves, but experiences them by proxy, whether you are an employer or you're an educator or you're a parent. If a student has some challenges with interoception where they're not as in touch with their physical body as others because of sensory processing disorders, they may wait to the last minute before they realize that they have to use the restroom, for example. And so you're constantly running the child to the restroom, or even for an adult, they're continually getting up out of the rushing out of the meeting room to use the restroom or to get a snack, etc. But if we have the patience and awareness around sensory processing challenges, we can say, instead of, oh, this person's so jumpy, they're always getting up out of their seat, or it's always an emergency when you have to use the restroom, or when you need a snack, etc. Why can't you tell me, when it first happens? Some people don't have that awareness within their body until it's an emergency. This auditory processing, I don't know how many times I, as a person with ADHD, have been called hard-headed or careless because I'm not hearing a person the first time that they're saying things. People have different processing speeds. So they may be able to understand what you're saying, but it doesn't click until the third time you say it, or until a few seconds later, etc. So patience and awareness around different sensory processing disorders, and challenges is really important for all of us, really, whether we experience it by proxy or ourselves.
Okay, and I'm gonna just tell a super quick story that really resonates with me. Part of my experience in hospitality is I was the hotel manager at the Hard Rock Hotel at Universal Orlando. And I remember one of our guests really wanted to come and stay at our hotel. And the guest contacted me as management and said, here's my problem. My son is on the autism spectrum, and he does not take well to change, but we really want to come to your hotel. What can we do? Let's begin a conversation. And I said, well, what we can do from the hotel side is I can take detailed pictures of the hallway, of the lobby, of the room. And that's exactly what I did. And we got together with that family, and they blew those pictures up and began to introduce that child to, here's where you're going. And what that did is that minimized that initial kind of jarring sensation of a new environment, and it worked out well. It was actually like a month that they kind of prepared that child to come to the hotel through pictures that we took. So that is a kind of an innovative way to look at how we as a society can begin to react to the various needs of, in this case, our guests. And our guests include everyone, and including the neurodiverse spectrum, if you will. Before I, continue to, ramble on about my stories, let's get back to the Dean Talk and our questions. So sensory learning and toys, for example, like fidget spinners, are used in cognitive development or ADHD and anxiety. Does it help, or is it a distraction? And let's also lean into Nomita. You're still muted, so you want to unmute?
Thank you. Yeah, so the fidget spinner specifically, I experienced that firsthand as an art teacher in school, and it did end up being a distraction to a large extent. I think, again, going back to if a child is helped to understand what particular tool they need, that is really going to be beneficial. And they can try it and they can see, yes, is this. So the fidget spinner, I think, was meant to be something tactile that would help them do something with their hands. But it's also, they started to make them with these colors and all of this visual that ended up, coming in the way for some that it wasn't necessarily, and there was, then it became marketable. And so it took a life of its own. So in of itself, yes, maybe it can be helpful to some extent, depending on the individual. But, one has to be aware that it kind of took on some other sensory sort of distractibility aspects as well. But I think, if you want to find the right sort of tool or toy, it's really, again, figuring out what is it that the child needs to block out. So if they're trying to focus, and focus is coming, all of the sensory stimulation around them is coming in the way of that focus, then again, understanding which stimulation is really the most distracting. Is it the visual around them? Is it the auditory, what they're hearing? Is it what they're seeing? Is it the fact that they need to move? Is it, or do they need something to actually feel so that they can bring back their focus? So once they understand what that is, then you provide that tool based on, what you understand they need. So we used to, sometimes for the children who needed to move a lot and who needed to be able to sit for 10 minutes and take in information, they were given the sort of the little exercise balls to sit on instead of a chair. So they could, wiggle while they're listening, not too much, but just enough to give them that feedback, that movement feedback that calmed the sensory need enough to allow them to then focus, to allow the cognition to sort of take front and center and be able to focus. or if they need something to touch, like Play-Doh to squish, is it something that you need to put pressure and squeeze? Is it just something that you need for comfort, like something soft? So you put a tiny little stuffy toy or something in their pocket so they can quietly have their hand in their pocket and they've got their fidget, whatever they need. The fidget toys ended up being, something that became, again, thinking about what is it that one person needs versus what is it that the group needs. So the fidget spinners, don't always help because of that. But again, just figuring out what is it that tool is that you need, that you can use for that specific child once they've understood which of the sensory stimuli is actually distracting them, and then using something to fit that.
Okay, so we're looking at specializing, tailoring, and that's really the I guess modified or evolved role of the educator. We are no longer able to look at someone in a block and say, you are 1 to 2, so you need to learn this way, and you're 3 to 4, learn this way. We're really becoming, and that's what's so important about these talks, is that we are really highlighting that diversity in education is needed. Tanasia, I've seen you nodding quite a bit. Would you certainly, we're certainly looking for your feedback on this question as well. Tanasia?
Yes, I think there can be some level of distraction with when you're bringing in external toys. I think that they can also be very helpful. I love that Numita talked about individualizing and having a child really understand whatever accommodation that they have is for, how to use it. One thing that was top of mind for me throughout this conversation is how people can use their own bodies to stimulate themselves, and normalizing self-stimulation within your body. Some people may rock back and forth as a way to stimulate themselves while they're in the classroom, or even to help to regulate themselves if they're overstimulated, and decreasing shame around that. To be honest, I'm turning off my camera because I don't want people to see me like going back and forth. And so normalizing self-stimulation, whether it's with a toy or with your own body. If somebody is squeezing their hands together like this, or somebody might be, like I said, rocking back and forth, or blinking more. So normalizing these things in the classroom and in the workplace, and having conversations about how these things are normal, and they're a part of some people's everyday lives. And also not just normalizing it for everybody on the outside who may not be personally experiencing this, but also tackling the shame that people can have if they have these needs to stimulate themselves. And on that note, I'm gonna keep my camera on. If y'all see me rocking, or y'all see me grabbing a Cheerio or something to keep myself regulated, then so be it.
Tanasia, I wanted to say this opens up a really important part of the conversation. And what that is let's take a scenario of employment, and let's say that we are looking for a certain type of a person that can perform at superlative levels. And part of that may be a mannerism, for example, that you said that could be rocking. Now, at some point, the conversation should be had, this person is going to rock. Even if you look in the chat, Ebony Kenny said, I rock. So it's one of these things where you want employers to be aware that there may be certain nuances that do not take away from performance. In other words, don't get distracted by the rocking, people. If you hire them to crunch your numbers, they're going to be the best number crunchers that you ever had. Don't be distracted by the rocking. And we absolutely need to have that conversation so that we can push this ahead. I see our chat has gotten a little more lively. So what I'm going to do is take a quick look at that and see where we are. So we have Nicole again, who's saying, as someone who was in elementary in the 1960s and clearly had some issues with overstimulation. So her behaviors were seen as strange, and underperformance was seen as laziness. that created a sense of shame that Tanisha is speaking about. It really piggybacks very well off of the example that I just used. And I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted that question in the chat. We are going to continue. Yeah, absolutely, Nicole. Thank you so much for participating, as always. And the conversation has, we try to structure these conversations to the best of our ability, but due to the nature of the disclaimer, due to the nature of our conversation, we end up, going off into different areas as needed in real time. Stimulants, including medication, from drinking your daily Coca-Cola, for example. This is not a commercial for Coca-Cola. We can substitute any, drink that has caffeine or whatever. For Coca-Cola, we can use Orange Crush, we can use 7-Up, whatever. There you go. To Adderall, we are dependent on some of our stimulants. With awareness of low stimulant medication comes sound alternatives and treatments, for example, Strattera. What are some of the dangers? And let's open the conversation up and let's talk about that. Tanisha, let's go to you first. And you're muted. Thank you.
Gotcha. Thank you, Stephen. I was actually replying to Nicole in the chat about how a lot of times girls and women are underdiagnosed, or challenges that they may have with stimulation in the classroom are often, as Nicole said, attributed to personal characteristics like laziness, which she mentioned, instead of people looking at the underlying needs in those situations. So thank you again for that, Nicole. And I got distracted by that, honestly. So can you repeat to me which question we're on right now?
Absolutely. And this is so poignant and so relevant because, folks, what this is doing is we're living this in real time, and we are open and we are transparent. And that's really the expectation here. So the question again, stimulants, including medication from drinking your daily soda or pop, as people may say it, to Adderall, we are dependent on some of our stimulants. With awareness of low stimulant medication comes some sound alternatives and treatments. In other words, what we're looking at is there's stimulant medication, there are stimulants that you can take that are over the counter, for example, and then there are things that dull stimulation, whether it be medication or whether it be here we go. Whether it be medication or whether it be meditation. Okay. Well, right. Okay. Yeah. I have to pat myself on the back. Right. Exactly. Okay. So with that said, Tanisha, now I just kind of reframed the question, and you've got the next word.
Gotcha. So when we're talking about medications, it can be a very stress-inducing topic, and it's also a very contested topic, whether to medicate or not medicate. And so the first thing that I want to say is that it's important to find a practitioner, a licensed practitioner who specializes in psychiatry, or specializes in being able to prescribe medication, and or your therapist. Someone who is professional, also someone who you trust, so that you can figure out what's right for you or what's right for your child specifically. And a resource for that is psychologytoday.com, which is a place where you can find tailored options. You can tailor all the filters by your insurance, by the different type of practitioner you're looking for, and for one thing, get evaluated, and then be able to get sound and objective advice about what medication might be right for you based on your needs. Also,
okay. Let me jump in there quickly and talk about psychology versus psychiatry. So you have the psychologist, which is certainly the more holistic approach. That is going to be the conversation, that trust factor that you just alluded to. And then you have psychiatry, which is that same component, but the psychiatrist can prescribe medication. So this particular conversation, the way that we're framing it is,
you need to look for options, and that may not be as easy as, oh, let's go straight to a psychiatrist. Maybe we can start with the therapy and start with the psychology role first, and that may address and give you some insight into what's going on. I just wanted to stop there for a second and talk about the difference. Go ahead, Tanisha.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that, Stephen. There are a wide range of options that we choose for ourselves. And then there's also different ways that we can be self-medicating without even realizing. And so a reason why a lot of professionals do recommend at least exploring the medication route, because just because you talk to a psychiatrist, et cetera, doesn't mean that you have to, go through with the medication route. But medication is a good option because it's regulated. There's a partnership between you and your professional. And so it's less options for some negative self-medication, which can be, some people are overeating and have had challenges with their weight throughout their life and don't realize it's something that is going on within that could possibly be taken care of or helped by using medication, et cetera. Some people cope with drugs. There's a lot of information about the links between having something like ADHD and marijuana use. It's been shown that people with ADHD tend to be three times more likely to use and or abuse marijuana, et cetera. So medication can be a good route opposed to some self-medication routes that can have some more negative consequences.
Okay. And that certainly brings up another kind of parallel there, which is going to be, for example, someone who goes through a traumatic injury, they're on opioids, that's medicated, and as you mentioned, those that they have a dosage, and then for whatever reason their insurance runs out or whatever. Now they're on the street, they're still in pain. So what do? A common term is to continue the opioid use, whether it be heroin, for example. So there, though, and this is the important part, super important, and now we're talking specifically about pain management, is if you're getting something off the street, you don't know what's in it. So that's where fentanyl and all that kind of stuff gets involved, versus that pain medication or that pain management through prescribed opioids. So I just wanted to, delineate that there is a use for pain management and for other types of chemical management that can work with medicine, but there are also some holistic approaches as well. You just want to be very balanced with that. Ebony Kinney, I would like for you to weigh in on this question about stimulation medication.
Sure. I think what I'm noticing in this conversation and underpinning of it is that society has kind of made that there is a normal, and that some of these things that people may need could fall outside of this. And so what I'm getting on my timeline, because I've raised my awareness for promoting the talks and things like that, is stimulant-free ADHD medication, non-stimulant, alternatives. And all that I'll say is I just want to kind of raise a little bit of awareness that even though you're taking something that isn't been prescribed by a doctor or is considered natural, your brain is still changing some of its way of functioning in terms of dopamine levels and neurotransmitters, so that eventually you might need more of this medication. So even if you're taking something that's natural, seems harmless off the internet, to still kind of look and see, well, what do doctors or professionals say about it? Read the research on it. Are people increasingly needing to take more of it? What else is that doing in my brain? Because it has an impact on you. So we can regulate it from everything by what we eat and beyond. But I know I was adult diagnosed as ADHD, and I tried stimulant medication, and it gave me anxiety, which I had never experienced. So then I began to look for holistic methods and routes, and it just takes a whole partnership, I think is the word that Tanisha entered into the conversation, in order to really get to what's going to work for me. And so we aren't swayed by some of these, oh, be normal sort of medications that they seem to be kind of pushing on timelines.
Oh, okay. What comes to mind for me is that dopamine connection, that feel-good connection, which is important. Laughter releases dopamine in some people. For me, laughter releases dopamine. I can tell you for me what does not release dopamine. Running a 26-mile marathon for me is not going to release any dopamine. It's going to, have me end up in the trauma center.
Same.
However, right. However, there are people, you can see them, who run 26 miles. You know how far that is? I mean, my brain doesn't even contemplate. And as they're running, that dopamine is released. And that's what we're getting into here in the conversation, is there is not necessarily a specific cut and dry path when it comes to overall care. And I think that just a great conversation. I mean, this conversation has opened up so many doors and opened up so many other these micro conversations that we want to start the conversation, folks. We want the conversation about neurodiversity to begin. It's going to end up in different lanes. It's going to end up in different lanes. It's going to end up controversial, definitely, as those lanes form, depending on where in the spectrum you go. But right now, the important thing is it's okay to talk about neurodiversity. And I will stand on that we are all neurodiverse, period. And we want to make sure that that neurodiverse aspect is applied in a diverse way. Tanasia, jump in and let's have your contribution to this portion of the Dean Talks.
Absolutely. On the medication side, I just wanted to say, as Ebony mentioned, there is a serious adjustment period that people need to get through a lot of the times when they are on medication that can last up to 3 months, where it can affect the way someone's able to sleep, the way they're eating, and can have so many different side effects as a person's body is adjusting. And so it's important for teachers and educational professionals, daycare professionals, and also employers in the workplace to understand how this adjustment period might be affecting people. And the last thing that I wanted to say, Ebony mentioned earlier, different cultural influences that might affect the way that we view these differences. I always honestly go to two of the biggest tenets that our country was built on, culturally, politically, etc., are capitalism and white supremacy, honestly. Both of these things emphasize product over process, emphasize homogeneity or people being the same or assimilating to a certain standard. It emphasizes the sense of urgency. And none of these things are in alignment with or allow room for diversity, equity, and inclusion in any way. And so it's not just that people have challenges within themselves or that we need to adjust. This is the way our country is set up. It's not set up for us to have diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to think about neurodiversity and neurodivergence and people's challenges. And so I just wanted to call that out, to be honest, and to help us to always have that awareness that we are to be like dismantling these systems at the same time that we are understanding these things more. We're taking steps towards dismantling these systems and ideals that make it harder for us to have DEI by understanding more, and then taking that understanding and putting it into action to have a more inclusive country and society, schools, workplace, and environment.
Okay, Tanasia, I'm going to really, I'm going to double down on that, and I'm going to go as far as saying, we said that we're going to talk for about an hour, and we are conditioned to meet at the top of the hour, 15 minutes past, 30 past, and 45 minutes past. We are conditioned for that. What we are doing right now is we are just going to say, we're going to keep talking. And we're going to keep talking until this conversation is over. Now what that does not mean that we'll be here for another hour. Let's get that straight. But what it does mean is that we are even though we weren't set up for this, just like was mentioned by Tanasia, we were not set up for, designed for diversity to work. We were set up for everyone to act the same like robots so that we could go invade other people's countries. But outside of that, we need to look at and apply that. We're going to break that bound. We're going to end it at not 1 hour. We're going to end 1 hour and 6 minutes. We're going to end 1 hour and 5 minutes. So I am just making an example of that, and that is what we are standing on. Nomita, hop in there.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. The cultural piece is so important. Even working with, parents trying to make a decision for their children, you really want to be mindful of what the cultural background is, what is the cultural sort of norms around medication and what that means. And, when you're trying to advocate for a child, but you also need to take into consideration that and be very mindful of that. The other thing is really being very, very mindful of the role of trauma in all of this, because ADHD, gets diagnosed, but symptoms of trauma can very much mimic symptoms of ADHD. And with children, from cultures and minorities who have gone through generational trauma, it is really, really important to make sure that, we're taking that into account. And, you can have the diagnosis of ADHD and it can be compounded by trauma. So, you want, it's all of the layering. You want to find all of the layers and you want to address all of the layers because, the sensory piece of it, maybe it can also be heritable. It can be in DNA. It can be trauma is in DNA. It's, you want to really, really think about all of those pieces, the generational piece, the history, the family history, the cultural history, all of it. So just to make sure that we're taking all of that into account. And, again, the labels are important for various reasons, just to be able to understand and name something. But we really want to pay more attention to what is actually happening. What is the symptom? What is going on? And just address what needs to be addressed without getting too caught up on, what it's called, because that has its place, obviously for, insurance and all of the capitalistic reasons that it came about. But at the same time, so, we have to pay attention to it for that reason. But the focus really needs to be on what is going on, what is the need, and how do we, make everyone included in and get the care and, the environments and all of that they need. And trauma is a huge part of that. So just wanted to.
Really, trauma is such a huge part of the conversation that we really are going to need to unpack trauma and neurodiversity really in its own episode. It's that important. So I'm actually going to refrain from going down that particular rabbit hole right now because I have a lot of comments about trauma and neurodiversity. But what I do want to do, Nomita, while we kind of, just that was a very poignant statement. We are beginning that wrap-up process. That we're beginning that hybrid kind of. We are not conforming to our hour, but at the same time we're being aware that people have other things to do. So we'll take that into consideration. Nomita, tell us how to contact you and tell us some of the things that you are working on.
So my main work that keeps me fully occupied is my caseload of clients that I see as an art therapist weekly. I can be contacted by email. So that's my first name, Nomita, Nomita, with an extra A at the end for my last name. So it's NOMITAA@gmail.com. So any discussion, any questions, always welcome to reach me via email. Thank you.
All right. And Tanasia, contact information for you. And what are you working on?
Thank you, Stephen. I just want to say this has been an excellent conversation, and I'm so honored to be here and love taking part. I'll also give my contact information, hazelton.tanasia@gmail.com. And I can also be contacted on LinkedIn. It's Tanasia H right now. And I have the same picture on my, the same picture that was displayed here when my video was off, is the same one that you'll see there. And I am the founding solutions specialist of Infinitely Impactful Solutions, where I partner with organizations to increase their impact through strategic impact planning and implementation. And one of the services that I do offer is consultation in the realm of DEI. And I'm looking to partner with an organization long-term as well right now as a DEI specialist and or a director of DEI. So those are some places that you can find me for a myriad of
Okay.
services.
Even from the employment piece, where we are is the conversation has moved from a diversity and inclusion department to really we're having conversations now about DEI departments. And think about that, folks. You know, we're on the cutting edge. You heard it here first on the Dean Talks that we are structuring these conversations for implementation, and we are bringing the expertise and resources to you. And it's up to you to contact people on our panel. Contact us. You can contact me directly. You can contact Ebony, and you can find us at ripefruit.org. That's ripefruit.org, which is our nonprofit division of ripefruitcreative.com. Next month will be virtual learning, a deep dive into virtual learning. And I also wanted to turn this over to our creative inspiration for this whole process, which is the one and the only superhero, Ebony King.
It's too much. I'm just so grateful and humbled by everyone that has come here to speak and just have such a great open conversation. I saw Tanisha Taylor's comment. She said, "What's going on? Like, what do we do?" And it's only the beginning. We're only beginning to unpack what's needed. Stick with us all year. I'm taking notes as ideas and sparks come out. I hope you do the same and put it in the chat. Nicole joined us. I think Nicole's on our panel next month and some other folks. So feel free to tune in to hear more about her. I was able to learn more about her as an artist here recently. And just want to say, this is such a big topic. Tell a friend. Thank you for attending.
And thank you, Ebony. And thank you, panelists. And I want to continue saying, I said this in our first talk, I was traumatized by music. I know you've never heard that before, and you need to keep listening. And because that in one of these talks, I'm going to unpack what that means to be traumatized by music. I mean, who even says that? My name is Stephen King. You have been listening to the Dean Talks with our esteemed panelists, and I thank all of you for joining us. Remember,
Sorry, before you completely sign off, thank you to Jamia, our engineer. She's working in the clouds in the background, making it all nice and smooth. So I don't want to forget to thank her for her involvement. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, everyone. And remember to continue the conversation, to reach out to Ripe Fruit, to reach out to this panel. Visit us at ripefruit.org. That's ripefruit.org. For more information, it's ripefruit.org. Have a great day.
Thank you.